The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Copper Ridge, turning the packed earth into a furnace that seemed to bake the life out of everything it touched. Sam Clayton pulled his worn hat lower over his weathered face as he guided his horse toward Kellerman's general store, the leather reins slick with sweat in his calloused hands. 3 years of solitary ranch life had carved deep lines around his gray eyes, and his once broad shoulders now carried the permanent stoop of a man who'd buried too much of his heart in the unforgiving frontier soil. The town was quieter than usual for a Saturday afternoon. Most folks were either taking shelter from the heat or had ridden out to the Hendricks spread for their eldest boy's wedding. Sam preferred it this way. Fewer stares, fewer whispered conversations that died the moment he walked within earshot. Ever since Sarah and little Emma had succumbed to the cholera outbreak 3 summers back, he'd become something of a ghost himself, haunting the edges of civilized society. As he dismounted near the hitching post, a commotion from the alley beside Murphy's saloon caught his attention. A heavily accented voice was shouting in broken English, mixed with rapid Spanish that Sam's limited understanding could barely follow. What he could make out made his jaw tighten with disgust. "Orale, $2, senor. Very good price for Apache girl. She cook, she clean, she no trouble." Sam's boots crunched on the scattered hay and horse droppings as he moved closer to the alley's mouth. What he saw there made his blood run cold. A thin, greasy-haired Mexican trader in a torn serape was gesturing frantically at a small figure huddled against the weathered boards of the saloon's side wall. The child, she couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, sat with her knees drawn up to her chest, her long black hair hanging like a curtain over her face. Her doeskin dress was torn and stained with dirt and what looked like dried blood. "She's strong, see? Apache blood make her tough. You buy, you no regret." The trader's gold teeth gleamed as he grinned at a portly man in a business suit who was shaking his head vigorously. "I ain't buying no Indian, you fool," the man spat, backing away. "Take your heathen merchandise somewhere else before the decent folks see what you're peddling." The trader's face darkened. "Somebody buy. I no feed her no more $2 or I leave her for coyotes." Sam felt something twist in his chest, a pain he'd tried to bury alongside his wife and daughter. The way the child sat there, so still and silent, reminded him of Emma during those final days when the fever had burned away her laughter and left only frightened eyes in a too pale face. "What's going on here?" Sam's voice cut through the trader's increasingly desperate sales pitch like a whip crack. The Mexican spun around, his nervous energy immediately focusing on this new potential customer. "Ah, senor, you look like smart man, see? You want Apache girl. Very cheap. Only $2. Where'd you get her?" Sam's hand instinctively moved closer to the Colt 45 on his hip, though he kept his voice level. The trader's eyes darted away. She orphan, senor. Very sad story. Banditos, they attack her village near Sonora. Kill many people. I find her, I save her life. Now I need money for supplies, so I sell her to Good Home." Sam studied the man's face, reading the lies in every shifting expression. More likely, this vulture had been part of whatever had destroyed the girl's family, or had bought her from those who were. The frontier was full of men who made their living off other people's misery. The child still hadn't moved or made a sound, but Sam could see her small body trembling despite the oppressive heat. When he crouched down to get a better look at her, she finally raised her head. The sight hit him like a physical blow. Her dark eyes held the same hollow, haunted look he'd seen in his own mirror for the past 3 years. This was a child who had watched her world burn and somehow survived to bear witness to the ashes. "She speak English?" Sam asked, never taking his eyes off the girl. "Little bit, see. Very smart girl. You teach her more, she learn quick." Sam reached slowly into his vest pocket, feeling the weight of the 2 worn silver dollars he'd planned to spend on supplies. Sarah's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, the same gentle tone she'd used when they talked about maybe taking in one of the orphans from back east after Emma was born. "Every child deserves a chance at a real family, Sam. Every single one." Aiyana. The word was so soft, Sam almost missed it. The girl was looking directly at him now, her small voice barely audible above the trader's continued sales pitch. "My name, Aiyana." The Mexican trader stopped talking, apparently surprised that his merchandise had spoken. Sam leaned closer, keeping his movement slow and non-threatening. "That's a pretty name," he said quietly. "What's it mean?" For the first time, something flickered in those dark eyes. Not quite hope, but maybe the memory of what hope felt like. Eternal blossom. Sam made his decision. He stood up and turned to face the trader, pulling out the 2 silver coins. The Mexican's face lit up with greedy satisfaction, but Sam's expression could have frozen water in July. "I'm not buying her," he said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that came from years of dealing with rattlesnakes and claim jumpers. "I'm paying for her freedom. After this, she makes her own choices about where she goes and what she does." "You understand me?" The trader's grin faltered slightly, but the sight of the money quickly restored his enthusiasm. "Si, senor. Of course. Very noble of you." Sam dropped the coins into the man's outstretched palm with obvious disgust. "Get out of my sight. If I see you in this territory again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." The Mexican didn't need to be told twice. He pocketed the money and scurried away toward where his mule was tied, leaving Sam alone with the girl in the narrow alley. Aiyana was watching him with careful attention, as if trying to determine whether he represented a new threat or something else entirely. Sam crouched down again, this time close enough to see the intelligence behind her wariness. "You're free now," he said simply. "You can go wherever you want. But if you don't have anywhere to go—" He paused, surprised by how difficult the next words were to say. "I've got a ranch about 5 miles north of here. It's not much, but there's food and a roof that doesn't leak much. You'd be safe there." The girl studied his face for a long moment, and Sam had the unsettling feeling that she was reading things in his expression that he didn't even know were there. Finally, she gave a small nod. "I come with you," she said quietly, "for now." As Sam helped her to her feet, he caught sight of Martha Kellerman's pinched face peering out from her store window, her expression promising trouble. By tomorrow, the whole town would be buzzing with news of Sam Clayton's Indian purchase. But as he looked down at Aiyana's small hand trustingly placed in his weathered palm, he found he didn't much care what the gossips had to say. Some things were worth the price you paid for them, even if that price turned out to be higher than $2 silver. The ride back to Sam's ranch passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the steady clop of his horse's hooves and the occasional creak of leather. Aiyana sat rigid behind him on the saddle, her small hands gripping the cantle so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Every few minutes, Sam felt her tense when a hawk's cry echoed across the desert, or when the wind rustled through the mesquite bushes. The child was wound tight as a watch spring, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. As they crested the low ridge that overlooked his property, Sam saw his ranch through what he imagined were her eyes. The single-story adobe house looked smaller and more weathered than he remembered, its red tile roof cracked and missing several pieces. The barn leaned slightly to one side, and the corral fence needed mending in at least 3 places. It wasn't much to look at, but it had been home to him and Sarah for 8 years before the cholera took her. "This is it," he said quietly, feeling the need to break the silence. "It's not fancy, but it's sturdy." Aiyana said nothing, but he felt her shift slightly as she took in the sight of the scattered cattle grazing in the distance and the vegetable garden Sarah had planted that he'd somehow managed to keep alive through sheer stubbornness. Sam guided his horse to the hitching post near the front porch and dismounted, then turned to help Aiyana down. She slid from the saddle with the fluid grace of someone who'd been riding since childhood, landing silently on her feet. For a moment she stood perfectly still, her dark eyes scanning the horizon like a wild animal checking for predators. "Come on," Sam said gently, gesturing toward the house. "Let's get you something to eat." The interior of the adobe was cool and dim after the blazing heat outside. Sam had kept it clean enough, but it still felt empty in a way that went beyond mere tidiness. The silence seemed to press in on them as Aiyana followed him through the small front room with its simple furniture and cold fireplace. In the kitchen, Sam busied himself with lighting the stove and pulling out what food he had on hand: some hardtack, a few strips of jerky, and a jar of peaches Sarah had canned the summer before she died. He was painfully aware of how the child stood just inside the doorway, poised to run if necessary. "You hungry?" he asked, setting a plate on the wooden table. Aiyana nodded almost imperceptibly. When Sam gestured to one of the chairs, she approached it cautiously, as if it might be a trap. She sat on the very edge of the seat, ready to spring up at a moment's notice. Sam placed the food in front of her and stepped back, giving her space. He watched as she examined each item carefully before taking small, deliberate bites. Her table manners were impeccable. Someone had taught her well before her world had fallen apart. "There's a room in the back," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Used to be." He stopped himself before mentioning Emma. "It's got a bed and a window. You can use it if you want." Aiyana looked up at him, and for a moment he saw a flicker of something, that might have been gratitude, but it was quickly replaced by wariness. "Why?" she asked simply. Sam sat down across from her, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. "Because everyone deserves a safe place to sleep. You no want payment?" The question hit Sam like a physical blow. He could see in her eyes that she'd learned to expect the worst from the world, and the knowledge of what she'd probably endured made him sick to his stomach. "No," he said firmly. "No payment. You're safe here, Aiyana. I give you my word." She studied his face for a long moment, and Sam found himself holding his breath. Finally, she gave a small nod and returned to her food. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Sam rose and moved to the window, his hand instinctively moving to his gun belt. Through the dusty glass, he could see 3 riders approaching at a steady canter. His heart sank as he recognized the lead rider, Martha Kellerman, accompanied by her brother-in-law Jack and Deputy Tom Morrison. "Stay here," Sam told Aiyana, but when he turned around she was already standing, her body coiled like a spring. "Trouble?" she asked. "Maybe, but I'll handle it." Sam stepped out onto the porch as the riders pulled up in front of his house. Martha Kellerman's face was flushed with righteous anger, her grey hair pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her features. Jack Kellerman was a smaller, meaner version of his deceased brother, with the kind of cruel eyes that enjoyed other people's pain. Deputy Morrison looked uncomfortable, his young face troubled. "Sam Clayton," Martha began without preamble, "what in the name of Christian decency do you think you're doing?" "Afternoon, Martha," Sam replied evenly. "Something I can help you with?" "Don't you play innocent with me. The whole town's talking about how you bought yourself an Indian girl. Have you lost your mind?" "I didn't buy anybody," Sam said, his voice carrying a warning edge. "I helped a child who needed help." Jack Kellerman spat into the dirt. "Same thing, ain't it? You brought a savage onto your property, and now she's your responsibility. Question is, what you planning to do with her? That's between me and the girl." "Like hell it is." Martha's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You think we're going to let you harbor a potential spy right here in our backyard? For all we know, she's marking our locations for her savage relatives." Sam felt his temper starting to fray. "She's a child, Martha. A scared, hurt child." "She's Apache," Jack snarled. "They're born killers, every last one of them. You keep her here. You're putting all of us at risk." Deputy Morrison finally spoke up, his voice hesitant. "Sam, I understand your intentions are good, but folks are worried. Maybe it would be better if you took her to the Indian agency in Tucson, so they can lock her up on a reservation?" Sam's voice was cold as winter steel. "I don't think so." "Then what?" Martha demanded. "You going to raise her like she's your own daughter? Teach her to read and write so she can be a better spy?" The cruel words hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. Sam could feel Aiyana's presence behind him, knew she was listening to every word even though she'd stayed inside as he'd asked. "What I do on my own land is my business," Sam said quietly, "and I'd suggest you remember that. Not when it affects the safety of decent folks," Jack shot back. "You got 24 hours to get rid of her, Clayton. After that, we might have to take matters into our own hands." The threat was clear, and Sam felt his hand drift toward his gun, but Deputy Morrison held up a restraining hand. "Now hold on, Jack. Nobody's taking matters into their own hands. This is still a matter for the law to handle." "What law?" Martha shrieked. "There's no law that says a white man can't protect his community from savages." Sam had heard enough. He stepped forward, his presence suddenly menacing despite his calm demeanor. "Get off my land. Now." For a moment, the confrontation balanced on the edge of violence. Then Deputy Morrison gathered his reins and turned his horse. "Come on, folks, we've said our piece." As the 3 riders departed, Sam could hear Martha's voice carrying on the wind, promising that this wasn't over. He stood on the porch until they were out of sight, then turned to find Aiyana standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined. "They want me gone," she said simply. "They want a lot of things they're not going to get," Sam replied. "Question is, what do you want?" Aiyana looked out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set in shades of orange and red. "I want to stay," she said quietly, "if you let me." Sam felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief he'd carried for 3 years. "Then you stay." But as he watched the dust cloud from the departing riders, Sam knew that the real trouble was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Martha Kellerman, and Sam had begun to think they might have weathered the worst of it. Aiyana had settled into a careful routine around the ranch, helping with small chores, and gradually speaking more English as her confidence grew. She had a quick mind and an even quicker smile when she thought no one was watching, moments that reminded Sam achingly of his lost Emma. On Wednesday morning, Sam was teaching her to milk the cow when his border collie, Rex, suddenly went rigid, his ears pricked toward the eastern ridge. The dog's low growl sent ice through Sam's veins. Rex had been trained to distinguish between different types of visitors, and that particular growl meant only one thing: Apache. Aiyana, Sam said quietly, his hand moving instinctively toward his rifle. Get inside the house. But the girl was already moving, not toward the house but toward the ridge where a line of riders had appeared against the morning sky. Sam's heart hammered as he counted them. 6 Apache warriors on horseback, their faces painted for war, their weapons clearly visible. At their head rode an older man whose bearing spoke of authority and barely contained rage. "Grandfather," Aiyana whispered, the word carrying both longing and fear. Sam felt the pieces click into place. The lead rider's weathered face bore the same strong cheekbones and intelligent eyes as Aiyana, though his were currently burning with fury. This was Chief Nalnish, and he had come for his granddaughter. The Apache war party rode down the slope with practiced precision, spreading out to surround the ranch buildings. Sam kept his hands visible but ready, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger a bloodbath. When they were close enough to speak without shouting, Chief Nalnish raised his hand and his warriors halted. For a long moment, the two men studied each other across the dusty yard. Sam saw a leader who had watched his people suffer, who had lost more than any man should lose, and who was now faced with a white rancher who had somehow acquired his granddaughter. Nalnish saw a lone man who had taken Apache blood into his home, whose motivations were as yet unclear. "You are the one called Clayton," Nalnish said in careful English, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of leadership. "I am. And you're Aiyana's grandfather." "I am, Nalnish. She is Aiyana, daughter of my son Kuruk, who died defending her village from Mexican raiders. She is Apache. She belongs with her people." Sam could feel Aiyana trembling beside him, torn between two worlds. "She's safe here," he said carefully. "She's been well treated." "Oh, safe?" Nalnish's eyes flashed. "Safe among the people who steal our children and call it salvation? Safe among those who would make her forget her blood, her people, her name?" "I've never asked her to forget anything," Sam replied. "I've asked her to heal." The old chief's gaze shifted to Aiyana, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. He spoke to her in rapid Apache, his voice gentler now. She responded in the same language, her words tumbling over each other in obvious distress. Sam couldn't understand the words, but the emotion was clear. Aiyana was explaining something, gesturing toward Sam and then toward the house. Nalnish's face grew increasingly troubled as she spoke. Finally, the chief turned back to Sam. "She says you paid the Mexican dog who stole her. She says you freed her, but she chooses to stay. This is difficult to understand." "Sometimes the best choice isn't the easiest one," Sam said quietly. "She's been through hell, Chief. She needs time to decide what she wants for herself." "What she wants?" Nalnish's voice carried a dangerous edge. "She is Apache. Her place is with her tribe, learning the ways of her people, not living as a pet for a white man's guilt." The accusation stung because it carried just enough truth to hurt. Sam felt his own temper rising. She's not a pet. She's a child who's been through more than any child should have to endure, and she's smart enough to know the difference between someone who wants to help her and someone who wants to use her. "Use her?" Nalnish's hand moved to his war club. "You speak of using her? You who took her from her own blood?" "I took her from a slave trader who was selling her like livestock." Sam's voice cracked like a whip. "Where were her people then? Where were you when she was being sold in an alley for $2 silver? The words hit Nalnish like a physical blow. For a moment the proud chief's composure cracked, revealing the pain beneath. "We searched for her for 3 moons. The raiders scattered like coyotes, taking different paths. We found the bodies of her parents, but no trace of her until word came that a white rancher had bought an Apache child." Sam saw the grief in the old man's eyes and recognized it as a mirror of his own. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, his anger fading, "and I'm sorry it took so long for you to find her. But she's here now, and she's alive. That's what matters." "What matters," Nalnish said with cold dignity, "is that she comes home to her people, to learn her heritage, before it is lost forever." Aiyana stepped forward then, her small voice carrying clearly in the tense air. "Grandfather, I remember the stories. I remember the songs. I remember who I am." She spoke in English, but Sam could see she was making a point to both men. "I remember Mama teaching me to weave. I remember Papa showing me how to track deer. I remember the night the bad men came with fire and guns. Her voice grew stronger. I remember hiding in the rocks while they killed everyone. I remember the Mexican man who found me and hurt me and sold me like a horse. I remember thinking I would die before I saw another sunrise. Tears were running down her cheeks now, but her voice never wavered. Then this man came. He could have walked away. He could have let the Mexican take me to worse places. But he gave his money to free me, and he brought me here, and he never asked for anything but to let me heal. She looked between Sam and her grandfather, her young face grave with premature wisdom. I am Apache. I will always be Apache. But I am also Aiyana, who lives with the kind white man who saved her life. Both things are true. The silence that followed was broken only by the whisper of wind through the mesquite and the distant lowing of cattle. Sam could see the war being fought behind Nalnish's eyes, the love for his granddaughter, battling with the traditions and fears of a people under siege. Finally, the old chief spoke. You wish to stay with this man? For now, Aiyana said quietly. Until I am strong enough to choose what comes next. Nalnish studied Sam with new eyes. You would let her go, when she chooses to return to her people? If that's what she wants, Sam said without hesitation. I won't hold her against her will. The chief considered this for a long moment. Then he dismounted and approached Sam directly. The two men stood face to face, and Sam could see the depth of pain and responsibility in the Apache leader's weathered features. You saved her life, Nalnish said slowly. For this I am in your debt. But know this, white man, she is precious to me beyond measure. She carries the blood of chiefs and the wisdom of generations. If harm comes to her while she is in your care, I will hold you responsible. Understood, Sam replied. And chief, she's precious to me too. I'll die before I let anyone hurt her. Naalnish nodded slowly, then turned to Aiyana. He spoke to her in Apache, his words carrying the weight of blessing and warning. She responded in the same language, and Sam saw tears in both their eyes. The old chief remounted his horse, but before he rode away, he fixed Sam with one final look. We will be watching, Clayton, and we will return for her when the time comes. As the Apache war party disappeared over the ridge, Sam felt Aiyana's small hand slip into his. They stood together in the yard, watching the dust settle, both of them knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger reckoning. He's angry, Aiyana said quietly. He's scared, Sam corrected. Same as me, same as you. We're all just trying to do right by the people we love. But as they walked back toward the house, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest choices were still ahead of them. 2 weeks of uneasy peace had settled over the ranch like morning mist, fragile and likely to burn off at the first sign of trouble. Sam had begun to hope that Chief Nalnish's visit might have bought them time to find a more permanent solution. That hope died with the thunder of hoofbeats at dawn on a cold October morning. Sam jerked awake to Rex's frantic barking and the sound of riders approaching fast. But these weren't Apache ponies. These were shod horses ridden hard, and there were too many of them. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, his heart sinking as he counted at least 8 riders cresting the ridge in the pale pre-dawn light. Aiyana, he called softly. Get up. We've got company. The girl appeared in the doorway of her room, already dressed and alert. 3 weeks of frontier life had sharpened her survival instincts to a razor's edge. How many? She asked, moving to the window beside him. Too many, Sam muttered, recognizing the lead rider even in the dim light. Jack Kellerman sat his horse like a man with blood on his mind, flanked by some of the rougher elements from Copper Ridge and beyond. Sam spotted at least 3 men he knew to be bounty hunters and Indian fighters, the kind who made their living from other people's misery. Sam Clayton, Kellerman's voice cracked across the morning air like a bullwhip. We know you got that Apache girl in there. Time to hand her over before more good people get hurt. Sam stepped onto the porch, his rifle held ready but not quite aimed. What's this about, Jack? And where's Deputy Morrison? Morrison's been relieved of his duties in this matter, called out a gravelly voice Sam didn't recognize. A hard-faced man with silver hair and cruel eyes spurred his horse forward. Name's Garrett Walsh. I'm a federal marshal, and I'm here on official business. Sam's blood ran cold. Walsh was a name he'd heard whispered in saloons, a former Confederate officer who'd made a career out of hunting down hostile Indians and anyone who harbored them. If Walsh was here, it meant someone with real authority wanted Aiyana badly enough to pay his considerable fees. What kind of official business? Sam demanded. Walsh pulled a folded paper from his coat. Warrant for the arrest of one Apache female, approximately 10 years old, wanted in connection with the murder of 3 Mexican nationals near Hermosillo. She's to be transported to Tucson for trial. That's a lie, and you know it, Sam snarled. She's a child, and she was a victim, not a perpetrator. Law says different, Walsh replied with a cold smile. Now you can hand her over peaceful-like, or we can come in and get her. Your choice. From inside the house, Sam heard a soft gasp. Aiyana had heard every word, and he could imagine the terror those false accusations must be causing her. The idea of her facing a corrupt territorial court on trumped-up murder charges made his stomach turn. She's under the protection of Chief Nalnish, Sam called out, playing for time. You take her, you'll have the whole Apache nation down on your heads. Jack Kellerman laughed harshly. That's exactly what we're hoping for, Clayton. Been looking for an excuse to clean out that nest of rattlers once and for all. Your little pet gives us all the justification we need. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about justice or even bounty money. It was about starting an Indian war that would justify seizing Apache lands and finishing what the army had started. Aiyana was just the spark they needed to light that particular fire. Give us 2 minutes, Sam called out, his mind racing. Let me get her ready. 1 minute, Walsh countered. Then we're coming in. Sam ducked back inside, where Aiyana stood pressed against the wall, her face pale but determined. They want to use me, she said quietly, to hurt my people. That's not going to happen, Sam said grimly, moving to the back window. The yard was empty. Walsh's men had made the mistake of assuming he'd surrender without a fight. Can you ride bareback? Better than most white men ride with saddles, she replied with a flash of her old spirit. Sam smiled, despite their desperate situation. Good. We're going out the back. Stay low and follow me. They slipped out through the kitchen door, keeping the house between them and the mounted men. Sam's horse was in the corral 50 yards away, 50 yards of open ground that might as well have been 50 miles if Walsh's men spotted them. On my signal, Sam whispered. Run for the horse. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. But as they prepared to make their break, a new sound froze them both in place, the distinctive war cry of Apache warriors echoing from the eastern ridge. Sam's heart leaped as he saw Chief Nalnish and a dozen mounted braves cresting the hill at full gallop, their weapons glinting in the morning sun. Walsh's men turned to face this new threat, and in that moment of distraction, Sam made his move. Now, he hissed, and they sprinted for the corral. They'd covered half the distance when one of the bounty hunters spotted them. There they are, he shouted, bringing his rifle to bear. Sam spun and fired, his shot taking the man clean off his horse, but the damage was done. Now everyone knew where they were, and the shooting had begun in earnest. Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet as Sam boosted Aiyana onto his horse's back, then vaulted up behind her. The animal, spooked by the gunfire, reared and nearly threw them both before Sam got it under control. Hold on tight, he shouted over the chaos, spurring the horse toward the narrow canyon that led into the Badlands beyond his property. Behind them, 2 separate battles were raging. Walsh's men had formed a defensive line, trading shots with Chief Nalnish's warriors while trying to pursue Sam and Aiyana. The Apache had the advantage of speed and knowledge of the terrain, but the white men had superior firepower and numbers. As they reached the mouth of the canyon, Sam risked a look back. He saw Chief Nalnish himself break away from the main fight, pursuing them with 3 of his best warriors. Whether the chief meant to help them or claim Aiyana for himself, Sam couldn't tell, but either way, they were now being hunted by both sides. The canyon walls rose around them like the ribs of some ancient beast, offering concealment, but also trapping them in a maze of stone and shadow. Sam knew these trails better than most, but Nalnish and his warriors had been born to this country. It would be a race to see who knew the land better, and who wanted Aiyana's safety more. Where are we going? Aiyana called over the thunder of hoofbeats. Devil's Backbone, Sam replied, naming the treacherous ridge that separated his land from the deep desert beyond. It's the only way out that they can't follow with horses. And after? Sam didn't answer immediately. After Devil's Backbone lay hundreds of miles of desert, mountains, and hostile territory, a landscape that could kill them as easily as any bullet. But it was also a place where a man and a girl could disappear, at least long enough to figure out their next move. After, he said finally, we find out who we really are when everything else is stripped away. The sound of pursuit was growing closer, and Sam could hear the distinctive whistle calls that Apache warriors used to coordinate their movements. Soon they would have to abandon the horse and continue on foot, trusting their lives to the unforgiving wilderness that stretched beyond the canyon walls. As they climbed toward Devil's Backbone, Sam realized that the comfortable fiction of their temporary arrangement was over. From this moment on, they were bound together by something stronger than law or custom or even blood. They were bound by the choice to face whatever came next as family, no matter what the cost. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky outcropping where Sam and Aiyana had taken shelter, their horse long since abandoned at the base of Devil's Backbone. For 2 days they had played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the maze of canyons and mesas, staying just ahead of their pursuers through a combination of luck, skill, and Aiyana's uncanny ability to read the land. But now, their luck had run out. Sam peered around the edge of their rocky shelter, his heart sinking as he counted the riders spread across the desert floor below. Walsh and his remaining men, reduced to 6 after the running battle with Nalnish's warriors, had finally cornered them on a mesa, with only one way down. Worse, Sam could see Apache scouts on the surrounding ridges, their presence betrayed by the occasional glint of sunlight off metal. "We're trapped," Aiyana said quietly, stating the obvious with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who had already faced death too many times. Sam checked his ammunition. 3 bullets left in his rifle, 4 in his pistol. Not nearly enough if it came to a fight. Their water was almost gone, and the nearest source was a full day's walk through open desert that would leave them exposed to anyone with a rifle and a steady hand. "Maybe," he said, refusing to give up hope, "but trapped doesn't mean beaten." A voice echoed up from below, amplified by the natural acoustics of the rock formations. "Clayton, you hear me up there?" Sam recognized Walsh's gravelly tone and felt his jaw tighten. "I hear you. You're finished, Clayton. No way down except through us, and we got all day to wait you out. Send the girl down, and we'll let you walk away." "Go to hell, Walsh." The marshal's laughter drifted up on the desert wind. "Suit yourself, but when you get thirsty enough, you'll see reason." Sam slumped back against the rock, feeling the weight of his failures pressing down like the desert heat. He'd tried to save one child, and ended up putting her in more danger than ever. Sarah's voice seemed to whisper in his memory, but for once he couldn't make out the words. "You regret it?" Aiyana asked softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Regret what?" "Helping me. Taking me from the Mexican. All of it." Sam looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. Her doeskin dress was torn and dusty, her long black hair tangled with burrs and dirt, but her dark eyes held the same intelligence and determination that had first caught his attention in that alley behind Murphy's saloon. Somewhere along the way, this frightened child had become something more. She'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. "Never," he said firmly. "Not for 1 second." A new voice called up from below, speaking in Apache. Aiyana's head snapped up, hope and fear warring in her expression. "Grandfather," she breathed. Chief Nalnish's voice carried clearly in the thin desert air as he switched to English. "Clayton, you will listen to me." Sam moved to the edge of the rocks, keeping low to avoid sniper fire. Down on the desert floor, he could see a tableau that would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Walsh and his men had formed a defensive circle, their rifles trained outward at the Apache warriors, who had materialized from the desert like ghosts. Nalnish sat his horse in the middle distance, just close enough to talk, but far enough away to avoid the immediate crossfire. "I'm listening," Sam called back. "The White Marshal has brought war to Apache land. My warriors thirst for his blood." "Then take it," Walsh shouted back. "But the girl comes with us." "The girl belongs with her people." Nalnish's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Sam felt Aiyana tense beside him. The moment they'd all been dreading had finally arrived, the moment when she would have to choose between 2 fathers, 2 worlds, 2 very different kinds of love. "What do you want to do?" Sam asked her quietly. Aiyana closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked even younger than her 10 years. When she opened them again, Sam saw a resolve that belonged to someone much older. "I want to go home," she said simply. Sam's heart clenched, but he forced himself to nod. "Then that's what we'll do." But before he could call down to Nalnish, Aiyana continued, "But I want to take you with me." "I don't understand." "Home isn't a place," she said, her young voice carrying wisdom earned through suffering. "It's people who love you, people who choose to protect you even when it costs them everything." She stood up, moving to the very edge of their rocky perch, where both groups below could see her clearly. "Grandfather," she called out in English, her voice carrying across the desert with surprising strength. "I am here, little flower. The Marshal lies. I killed no one. I am victim, not killer. I know this. Nalnish replied. The Mexican dogs who sold you confessed before they died. Walsh's voice cut through the air like a whip. Doesn't matter what she did or didn't do, she's coming with us. She goes nowhere with you. Nalnish's reply carried the promise of violence. Aiyana took a deep breath. Grandfather, Sam Clayton is good man. He saved my life when no one else would help. He asks nothing from me except to be safe and happy. He is white, Nalnish called back, though Sam could hear uncertainty creeping into the chief's voice. So was my mother's teacher at the mission school. So was the doctor who delivered me. So is the trader who brings us blankets in winter. Color of skin does not make man good or bad. Choices make man good or bad. The desert fell silent except for the whisper of wind through stone. Sam could see Walsh's men growing nervous, their rifles wavering between the Apache positions and the mesa where he and Aiyana stood exposed. What do you choose, granddaughter? Nalnish asked finally. I choose family, Aiyana replied. Apache family and white family. I choose to learn the old ways from you and new ways from Sam. I choose to be bridge between two peoples instead of reason for war. Enough of this, Walsh snarled, raising his rifle toward the mesa. I'm taking that girl, dead or alive. But before he could fire, Nalnish's war cry split the air, and suddenly the desert erupted in gunfire. The Apache warriors, who had been invisible among the rocks, rose up like avenging spirits. Walsh's men, caught in the open with enemies on all sides, fought desperately but hopelessly. The battle was brief and brutal. When the smoke cleared, Walsh lay dead in the sand along with most of his men. The few survivors were already disappearing into the desert on foot, their horses claimed by the victorious Apache. Chief Nalnish rode up to the base of the mesa, looking up at Sam and Aiyana with eyes that held new understanding. Come down, both of you. We have much to discuss. The climb down was treacherous, but Sam and Aiyana made it safely to the desert floor. As they approached the old chief, Sam could see the internal struggle playing out behind his weathered features. You would truly let her choose? Nalnish asked Sam directly. It's her life, Sam replied. She's the only one who has the right to decide how to live it. Nalnish dismounted and walked over to Aiyana, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. For a long moment, grandfather and granddaughter looked into each other's eyes, conducting a conversation that needed no words. Finally, the old chief stepped back. You are wise beyond your years, little flower. Perhaps it is time for this old man to be wise as well. He turned to Sam, his expression grave but no longer hostile. You have proven yourself worthy of trust, white man. My granddaughter sees something in you that I was too proud to acknowledge. She will stay with you, but she will also come to our winter camp to learn the ways of her people. And when she's grown, Sam asked? When she is grown, she will choose her own path, as all free people must. Nalnish's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. But I think she has already chosen to walk between two worlds. It will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Sam replied. As the Apache warriors prepared to leave, Nalnish placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. You have given me back my granddaughter's life and her spirit. This makes you family, whether your skin is red or white. Thank you, Sam said simply. Aiyana hugged her grandfather fiercely, speaking to him in rapid Apache. When she finally released him, both had tears in their eyes. He says you are good father, she translated for Sam. He says he will watch over us both. As Chief Nalnish and his warriors rode away across the desert, Sam and Aiyana stood together, watching the dust settle. They had a long walk back to the ranch, and an even longer journey ahead as they learned to be a family. But for the first time since Sarah and Emma's deaths, Sam felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Ready to go home? He asked. Aiyana slipped her small hand into his weathered one. I am already home, she said. Home is wherever you are. And together, father and daughter walked into the desert sunset, bound not by blood or law or custom, but by the strongest force of all, love freely chosen and fiercely defended.